In films and novels, protagonists are always able to go back in time, prevent disasters, reverse decisions, or even save those long dead. We are drawn to these stories because they satisfy a powerful inner fantasy. If we had another chance, perhaps everything would turn out differently. Yet many philosophical and physical theories propose quite the opposite. Time travel may exist, but it cannot change history. Even if you really were to return to the past, everything you did would ultimately be part of history, not something that overturns it. The past is not soft clay, but a monument already set in stone. When you think you can alter it, you often end up merely completing the story as it was originally written. This seemingly counterintuitive idea is, in fact, rich in logic and philosophical depth. Next, I will guide you through why time travel cannot change history and the scientific and philosophical thinking behind it. Hi everyone, I'm Eric, a cat who dreams of becoming a philosopher. This is the place where I share my thoughts and explore new ideas with you all. So, let's dive into today's topic. The grandfather paradox is one of the most emblematic problems in the study of time travel. With a scenario that is simple yet astonishing, it challenges our understanding of time and causality. Suppose you invent a time machine and decide to travel back several decades to meet your grandfather when he was young. However, events take an unexpected and tragic turn. In some accident, you prevent your grandfather from fathering your parent. A question immediately arises. If your grandfather never had children, you would not exist. But if you never existed, how could you have traveled to the past to cause the accident in the first place? This contradiction, being both existent and non-existent, lies at the heart of the grandfather paradox. It is not only bewildering, but also exposes the deepest logical dilemma within time travel. Is it actually possible to change the past? If it were, causal relationships would collapse, and the entire historical timeline would be thrown into chaos. If it were not, the free will of the time traveler would be constrained, and nothing they attempted could meaningfully alter history. The grandfather paradox has prompted scientists and philosophers to propose various explanations aimed at resolving the contradiction in a logically coherent way, allowing time travel without violating causality or generating self-inconsistencies. Moreover, the paradox inspires deeper reflection on history, choice, and the structure of the universe, reminding us that our intuitive sense of time often runs counter to logical reality. It suggests that, even if we possess the ability to traverse time, the integrity of history might remain unshakable. Time travel, then, is not merely a technical challenge but a philosophical and logical one. The parallel universe's interpretation originates from the multiverse reading of quantum mechanics and puts forward a bold hypothesis. Whenever a choice is made, the universe splits into two or more parallel versions, with every option realized in some branch of reality. When this idea is applied to the grandfather paradox, the outcome is completely different. When you travel to the past and attempt to stop your grandfather from having children, you do not alter your original history. Instead, you create a new timeline. In this new universe, your grandfather never fathers your parent, and so you are never born there. But your original universe remains untouched, and in it you still come into existence and live your life. In other words, your actions affect only the future of the new universe, without erasing your own existence. The paradox thus dissolves, and causality stays intact. The paraverse's interpretation invites us to rethink the nature of time and choice. Time is not a single straight path, but a branching, tree-like network of infinite possibilities, with each decision giving rise to a new reality. This viewpoint not only offers a way to address paradoxes, but also provides fertile imaginative ground for science fiction and philosophy. For instance, if you were to reveal some truth about the future to your grandfather, it might trigger entirely different outcomes in the new universe, while the original universe would remain unaffected. Although no evidence yet confirms that the parallel universe's interpretation is real, it presents a cosmic vision full of possibilities, one in which time travel neither violates causality nor produces logical contradictions. It paints a wondrous picture of coexisting universes and reminds us that every choice may give birth to a new world. The Novikov self-consistency principle offers an elegant solution. If time travel exists, all events must remain self-consistent, and no logical contradictions can arise. In other words, you may travel back in time, but you cannot change what has already happened. Everything you do will simply be absorbed into the existing framework of history rather than destroy it. For example, if you travel to the past intending to stop your grandfather from getting married, you might slip, fall ill, or trigger some unexpected coincidence that inadvertently brings your grandparents together. In the end, the historical outcome remains unchanged. It is as though the universe quietly maintains logical coherence, refusing to allow paradoxes or let the timeline collapse. The self-consistency principle is not only a conceptual tool for science fiction, but also offers insights for real life. Some things can be changed, but others belong to a fixed framework within which our role is to choose the best possible actions, rather than fantasize about overturning the past. It reminds us that even with the ability to traverse time, we could not escape the laws of causality. The past has already been written into the cosmic script, while the future remains in our hands. The beauty of the Novikov principle lies in the way it allows time travel without generating paradoxes, while prompting us to appreciate the coherence of history and the continuity of cause and effect. It emphasizes that every event has its necessity, and the traveler's actions form a natural part of history rather than a force that can rewrite it. Across all theoretical frameworks, one of the most important conclusions in the study of time travel is this: history cannot be altered by traveling through time. Under the Novikov self-consistency principle, even if you return to the past, you cannot change events that have already occurred. History is fixed, and your actions can only be absorbed into it. Never overturn its established outcomes. This perspective reminds us that time has a self-preserving quality. The universe ensures causal continuity and does not permit paradoxes. In the parallel universe's interpretation, the situation appears different. You may travel into the past, but you enter a new branch of the universe. Your actions affect only the timeline of that new universe and do not alter the history of the world you came from. Even if you prevent some event in that new branch, you would return to your original world to find that nothing has changed at all. This tells us that the past is not soft clay but a solid structure, where every event has its own necessity and continuity. Philosophically, the idea that history cannot be changed reinforces the strength of causal laws, preventing paradoxes and logical contradictions. Psychologically, it reminds us that although the fantasy of rewriting the past is alluring, what we can truly control are our decisions in the present and the future. The value of time travel lies not in rewriting history, but in understanding how history takes shape and how we might act within the framework already set. Regardless of the interpretation, each emphasizes the self-consistency of history. Every event has its rationale, and the traveler's actions form only one small part of the vast flow of time, rather than a force capable of reshaping destiny as a whole. This perspective is both philosophically rich and physically coherent, giving us a more complete understanding of time, causality, and history. It transforms time travel from a fantasy of unlimited past alteration into a tool for observing history, understanding cause and effect, and thinking about the future with greater wisdom. From another perspective, I believe the grandfather paradox, the parallel universe's interpretation, and the Novikov self-consistency principle still have limitations in how they describe time travel, because they all begin from the standpoint of the traveler. If we shift instead to the viewpoint of a temporal observer, our understanding of the problem may change entirely. At its core, the grandfather paradox is a self-referential contradiction. If we change the subject to the grandfather, the question becomes, can a grandfather be killed by a descendant who has not yet been born to time travel? This produces two possible scenarios. In the first, the descendant does not exist, so the grandfather is not killed and history continues as usual. In the second, the descendant does exist. The grandfather is killed and the descendant therefore never appears. This contradiction is precisely the heart of the paradox. The parallel universe's interpretation avoids the contradiction by eliminating the causal link between the grandfather and the descendant and generating parallel worlds. Even if the grandfather is killed, the descendant still exists in the original universe. The Novikov self-consistency principle resolves the issue in another way. It requires history to remain consistent, meaning that even if the descendant exists, they cannot kill the grandfather, thereby preventing any logical break in the timeline. Both approaches elegantly remove the foundation of the self-referential contradiction, but each still has shortcomings in its finer details. For instance, although the parallel universe's interpretation preserves causal coherence, it renders time travel essentially one way and prevents any influence on one's original history. Novikov's principle, by contrast, restricts the traveler's freedom of action, ensuring they cannot truly change the past. Both frameworks overlook an important viewpoint. An observer's understanding of events and the development of history are, in fact, independent of each other. Put differently, what the time traveler does is inherently part of history, not a force capable of altering it. I believe that if we place greater emphasis on the observer's perspective, we come to realize that time travel is not about rewriting the past, but about reenacting events, observing how history forms, and understanding how one acts within a fixed framework. This approach respects causality while avoiding paradoxes, giving us a clearer understanding of time and transforming time travel from a science fiction fantasy into a philosophical tool for reflecting on history, causation, and the possibilities of the future. And the Novikov self-consistency principle, because its analysis is framed mainly from the time traveler's point of view, it easily introduces a conceptual bias. It treats a reverse chronological narrative as though it were a straightforward one. In other words, it assumes that the traveler sets out from a state of ignorance to change history, when in fact the traveler already knows the outcome and is merely re-experiencing the sequence of events. This misunderstanding leads us to misjudge how much freedom a time traveler actually has. Consider a single timeline with two roles: an observer who experiences events in chronological order, and a time traveler who attempts to alter them. Suppose an event occurs at point A, and the traveler departs from point B. If the traveler successfully prevents the event, we can ask three questions. First, does the observer see the traveler acting at point A? The answer is yes, because the very fact that the event is prevented requires the traveler's intervention. Second, can the observer at any later time perceive that the event once occurred? No, because the event was stopped at A, and thus leaves no trace to be recognized in the future. Third, if the observer and the traveler are the same person, what is the purpose of the journey? Clearly, the traveler's purpose is not to change history, but to maintain its self-consistency. On the other hand, if the traveler fails to prevent the event, the answers shift. At point A, the observer still sees the traveler, but the event occurs as history dictates. Both observer and traveler are simply woven into the established past. This shows that whatever the traveler does, their actions are already embedded within the historical framework. The idea of changing history is merely an illusion arising from the observer's perspective. Put differently, the very attempt to alter the past presupposes that the past was never altered. The traveler's behavior simply enacts the historical event rather than rewrites it. Thus, the Novikov self-consistency principle reveals a crucial insight. The traveler's apparent free will is in fact constrained by the requirement of historical coherence. Every action the traveler takes is already contained within the timeline, and the timeline remains unchanged. This invites us to reconsider the philosophical meaning of time travel. The traveler is not the manipulator of history, but its participant and witness. Seen in this light, the fantasy of changing the past is, at its core, a misconception. And recognizing this provides an important foundation for building coherent theories of time travel. Many people question whether, if a time traveler's actions are constrained by the self-consistency of history, this means our free will is completely taken away. In fact, the best philosophical account of free will is compatibilism, which argues that even if the world is deterministic, human beings can still possess free will. At first glance, this sounds contradictory. If everything is fixed by causal laws, how could we possibly be free? Yet compatibilism offers a more refined understanding. Freedom does not mean the absence of causation. It means that within an existing causal structure, we can still act according to our own will. In other words, our choices may have causes, but when those choices genuinely reflect our inner intentions and preferences, they are free. Freedom is not chaos or randomness, but simply this: when you want to do something, you are not forced or prevented by external factors. In everyday life, for instance, if you choose to drink coffee in the morning, that decision may be influenced by genes, habits, or culture, but it still expresses your own real preference. No one forced you, and no one stopped you. Your action is therefore free. From a compatibilist point of view, even if history and causal law already exist, we can still make authentic choices within that framework. This understanding is especially important for time travel. Even if the traveler cannot change history, he can still choose how to act in accordance with his own will. His choices shape his role in the event and his experience of history. Although they do not alter the final outcome, the freedom involved is still genuine. Compatibilism is essentially a refined form of determinism, building non-coercion into the definition of freedom, allowing us to preserve free will without violating causal law. Moreover, quantum mechanics in a single timeline interpretation does not necessarily contain true randomness. If all events can be derived from the current state of the world, determinism holds, and free will must be redefined as the compatibilist notion of autonomous action. From this perspective, even if time travel and the self-consistency principle constrain one's freedom of action, we still retain the capacity to choose within a fixed structure, the very essence of free will. In short, compatibilism makes free will compatible with historical self-consistency and the Novikov principle. It explains why, even if history cannot be changed, we may still possess freedom of action in time travel, and it grants us philosophical space to reflect on both the past and the future. In the parallel universe's interpretation, the operation of a time machine faces both technical and philosophical constraints. It is inherently a one-way ticket. In theory, time machines can operate in two modes: consciousness transfer and direct transfer. Consciousness transfer merely sends the traveler's mind back in time, but this past belongs to an entirely new parallel universe. The traveler's body, surroundings, and connections to their original world do not accompany them along the original timeline, meaning that no matter what they do, they cannot return to their starting universe. Direct transfer, in principle, could send the body along with the apparatus back in time, but this relies on one crucial condition: the ability to precisely locate the coordinates of the original universe. Physically, this is virtually impossible. Even harnessing the energy of the entire universe cannot guarantee a return to the exact world. Consequently, within the framework of the parallel universe's interpretation, the one-way nature of the time machine is unavoidable. A traveler may create a new parallel timeline, but they cannot return to their original universe to verify whether history has changed. This also implies that time travel, under the parallel universe's framework, cannot be technically demonstrated. Even if someone successfully traverses time, they cannot return to their original universe to show others the results of their journey, making the scientific validation of a time machine practically impossible. Moreover, the one-way characteristic in the parallel universe's framework reminds us that time travel is not merely a philosophical question. it is also a problem of physics and technology. It highlights the inherent limitations of temporal travel and shows that, even if traversal is possible, every action creates a new universe rather than rewriting the existing history. From this perspective, the parallel universe's interpretation both preserves causal consistency and reveals the fundamental irreversibility of time travel, further reinforcing the notion that history cannot be changed. Since individuals began claiming to be time travelers online, the topic has rapidly attracted widespread attention. Following this, numerous self-proclaimed time travelers have emerged, typically presenting two main claims. First, that they avoid causing large-scale changes to history out of fear of triggering a butterfly effect. Second, that they secretly travel back in time while circumventing official channels. From the perspective of time travel theory, however, both of these claims are mistaken. Firstly, the concern about a butterfly effect is unfounded. As previously discussed, whether within a single timeline or under the parallel universe's interpretation, a traveler's actions do not alter the original history. In the parallel universe's framework, any influence exerted on the past affects only a new parallel universe rather than the original one, leaving the historical outcomes of the initial universe unchanged. Even if a traveler were to reveal an impending disaster in advance, it would only modify events in the new universe, while the original history remains intact. In a single timeline, every action of a time traveler is already incorporated into history, with future events predetermined by self-consistency principles, making fears of a butterfly effect inapplicable. Secondly, the idea of circumventing official channels is also impossible. In a single timeline, any unlawful or socially disruptive action would inevitably be prevented or punished. As all actions are recorded in history, any attempt to secretly travel back in time cannot evade the oversight of historical causality. In the parallel universes scenario, time travel itself cannot be verified, meaning no official channel exists to circumvent. Consequently, under either framework, travelers cannot evade rules or alter history. Their so-called autonomy merely allows them to act within a new universe, without affecting the original timeline. This also reminds us that many self-proclaimed time travelers are likely misunderstanding the nature of temporal travel. They often interpret fantasies, psychological projections, or coincidences as historical traversal, which is actually a misapplication or distortion of time travel theory. Time travel is not a power to arbitrarily manipulate history. It is constrained by the laws of physics, causality, and historical self-consistency. A traveler's actions can only integrate into the existing historical framework, not rewrite the past. This explains why no credible evidence of time travel has ever appeared in reality, and underscores that the scientific constraints on time travel are far more stringent and subtle than those portrayed in science fiction. Generally, it is assumed that a time machine must be invented, yet this view is open to debate. Firstly, within the parallel universe's interpretation, the existence of a time machine cannot itself be verified, and a traveler's journey can only occur in theoretical or experimental contexts. Consequently, whether it can truly be considered an invention is questionable. Even if a theoretical model could be devised, practical proof and verification of traveling to the past would remain unattainable. In the case of a single timeline, another question arises: why must a time machine be invented by us, rather than brought back from the future and taught to us? Technically, there is no barrier since any missing knowledge could be transmitted along with the machine. Morally, there is no violation, as historical self-consistency ensures that transferring technology does not impede the natural development of science. In other words, the advancement of technology in history is not necessarily the result of a specific individual's creation, but could occur through transmission from the future to the past. So why do we still lack a time machine today? 3 possibilities can be considered. First, the parallel universe's interpretation is correct. And the universe we inhabit does not belong to a timeline in which a time machine has been brought back from the future. In this case, the absence of a time machine is reasonable. Second, time machines simply do not exist, meaning history cannot be altered, and no technological transmission is possible. Third, even if the technology is feasible, society may not yet have established the institutions or frameworks necessary to accept and regulate the use of a time machine. If society generally believed that history could be changed, time machines might lead to wasted resources and pointless historical conflicts, such as rival groups competing for control of the past. Moreover, within a single timeline, one proposed solution to the grandfather paradox is that those attempting to alter the past cannot access a time machine. In other words, the self-consistency of history directly limits the use of such technology. From a cognitive perspective, if we continue to believe that history can be changed, we cannot establish a safe or workable system for time machines. Therefore, the existence of a time machine depends not only on physical and technological feasibility, but also on our understanding of time, history, and causality. Based on the analysis above, I conclude that history cannot be altered through time travel. Both the parallel universes interpretation and the Novikov self-consistency principle emphasize the immutability of the past. A time traveler's actions can only integrate into existing history or create a parallel universe, but they cannot erase the traces of the original timeline. This understanding highlights that the feasibility of a time machine, the freedom of time travel, and the self-consistency of history are subjects explored jointly by science and philosophy, rather than concepts that can be whimsically overturned by science fiction. History has already been inscribed in the universe script. The future remains in our hands, but the past can never be rewritten. That's all for this video. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Every like, subscribe, and comment are a contribution to solving those difficult questions. I look forward to your joining our discussion and making a contribution to solving the difficult questions. Once again, thank you for your watching. Goodbye.